1, 2, 3, 4.
It's no time.
I am Neil McCormick, and you're watching Needle Time, where my guest is almost a legendary multi-instrumentalist with Genesis and his own mechanics, Mike Rutherford. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
You play a lot of instruments, and sometimes at the same time. It's one of the fascinating things, you know, contemplating what you do and how you do it. Certainly in early Genesis, you were the bassist and the rhythm guitarist, which is a fairly odd combination. I'm intrigued about how this comes about. So let's start off with what was it about music, first of all? Why was it a music that you were?
I think you've got to go back to remember that time, you know, sort of must have been about early 60s. The Beatles came out. It was a really exciting time. And I think, you know, there'd been a huge change in England. I've got a big thing about this, a huge social change. And I just caught that brunt of it, of that kind of old generation, empire days, 2 world wars drifting away. And we come along, you know, the young guns, having missed the war. And then the Beatles came out, and the Stones and the Who and the Kinks. Exciting time. And they're about sort of 6-7 years older than me. And still are. I always remind them.
Still are going.
I always remind, yeah, but in a sense it was a great time, actually. And they were like, you know, out doing it, and I was still at school. So, but it was, in a way, musically and culturally, an exciting time to be around, actually.
And you just got carried away. You thought, music's for me. When you started playing, what was your first instrument? Then what were you?
Guitar, always guitar.
Always guitar.
I didn't really go into bass until we started with Genesis. And
Right.
the other guitarist, Dan Phillips, was a better guitarist. So it was like, well, I'll do the bass then, you know, and rhythm too. But always the guitar. The keyboards never really appealed to me. Plus, in those days, the Beatles, you know, it was all about guitars, really.
Okay. How did you feel about becoming the bassist in this setup? Some people don't like to be demoted.
Yeah, I didn't really. I mean, because the one thing people often forget is I would still play a large chunk of a show or on the record on guitar. So 2 guitars sometimes, and then a bit of bass. I was never a sort of wild lead player. Always more a sort of chordal player, songwriter player. And so I didn't mind it. And then, of course, I found the bass pedals.
Yes,
So
well,
I
I'm
could do
intrigued by
both.
those. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, I still use them actually to this day when I write. It's a very important thing because basically, suddenly, Genesis could have like 2 guitars, a rhythm and a lead, and a bass player. So I used to sit down or stand and play pedals and fill the bass line in. So it gave us a much bigger sound, really, and a much sort of bigger range of music.
Does that require a special dexterity? When you first were playing 2 instruments and you're using all your limbs.
It requires concentration. There's been a few nights playing Star's Ready when I used to sit down and hit these long, big bass notes that had a long decay. So when you hit it, you were stuffed for about 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, but it's not like what a drummers do. They've got 4 things going at once,
Okay.
But it was actually it gave us a bigger platform to work from, really.
Genesis is a fascinating band because it's been through so many iterations of, been occasioned by lineup changes that has really changed the character of the band. And so you're never really talking about one band with Genesis. It's almost like 3 bands. But in the early Genesis with Peter Gabriel, What was the idea? Because it's something quite different to everything else that's around about at that moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear it now, I do kind of go, it's almost more different now than it was at the time, you know what I mean?
I actually just listened, knew this was coming up and listened to The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway and just thought, what a wild and mad...
Yeah, we were quite brave. I think you must remember also, people who are younger don't quite realise that in those days, there was very much a blank canvas of music. There wasn't much out there. Whereas now, everyone's in a band, everyone's playing music, which is great in a way, but the chance to be different was probably easier because there was less to be compared to. So we came out in different styles. We always say our influences were like the Beatles and Motown, but you can't hear it in the songs at all.
No.
But it kind of was there somewhere, but it's a bit like put a bunch of guys in the room and what comes out is what they do together. And so we were sort of, but in a way, quite free. There were no set precedents. We hadn't come from the blues route or the soul route, really. So we had a sort of a platform, slightly more folky start. And then a bit to sort of slightly more classical, grandeur stuff, So a range of styles in one song sometimes.
Did it, I suppose, prog rock has got a very bad name now, and often deservingly so, except in its origins it's basically saying, well, where can we take this music? It can go anywhere. I mean, was that the thing, right? Oh, look, we can make a concerto out of this. We can go.
Yeah, I mean, no one was trying to be clever. It was just like there were no rules. There were no record labels telling you what to do. It was like a sort of finding out stage. And plus, I think what's very important, the first 6 months we wrote as a band was in a cottage in Dorking. No influences. No one was in London. There were no bands being seen. We were like sort of shut away, and we kind of found an area that was slightly different, sort of probably English folk was the basis of it, and then sort of Tony's classical chords, a big range, and then Pete's kind of unusual words mainly, a big range of kind of musical styles, really.
The band changed very much after Peter left, so was he defining the direction of the band at that point?
I don't think so. I'm not sure anyone could really define it. I mean, The Lamb is very much his lyric, and it was quite an amazing journey, actually. Kind of Pilgrim's Progress, I'd say. I think if Peter had stayed, we'd have changed anyway. But it was probably coming, But something happens, when someone leaves, and in Peter's case it wasn't looked for, you kind of have to go, well, there's a new energy coming in, You suddenly have to change, which is not a bad thing, because it means that there's some fresh sort of way of doing things comes along.
Well, how was it when Peter left? Because, the singer... The frontman of the band leaving can usually mean the end of...
Yeah, well, the press were all like, the end of, ringing the bells. Luckily, by the time it came out in the press, we'd done most of the new album, Trick the Tail, and it was feeling quite interesting and strong.
What was the big difference between having Peter as a pure, kind of vocal... theatrical ideas man and having Phil Collins, your drummer?
I think the key thing really was that, in a sense, Phil couldn't do what Peter did. And he knew that too, and he wouldn't try to. Phil is not that kind of person. Pete's a sort of on-stage, rather mysterious, quite bizarre figure in a way, especially in those days, and Phil was the guy next door. So that was kind of his natural setting. So you couldn't try and do what Peter had done. And so we sort of just went with the flow, really.
Was Peter an odd ball in the ensemble? Is he always going to be an odd ball anyway?
Not really. Pete's sort of outside the box sometimes and quite brave, and sort of... It looks odd now when you see some of the sort of costume and things he wore, but at the time, everyone forgets there were no PAs you could hear the words from. So Peter was like, they couldn't hear what was singing at all. So he kind of slightly acted out the song and gave it a sort of slightly theatrical setting, which sort of told a story. And they were very much Peter's ideas. I'm sure we'd have always said, well, I'm not sure, And he kind of just pushed them on, which, and looking back now, it was really quite a brave combination.
A flower. Will fall to go for butterfly, butterfly, butterfly. Open your eyes, it's full of surprise. Everyone likes the possible loss. And the musical box. dad, I'm getting back. Everyone's happy to be here. This Winston Churchill dressed in rag. He used to be a British flag, just a man, what a drag. The dog was a prince. The prince was a brick. That was an egg. The egg was a bug. Haven't you heard?
There was no, almost no pause then when he left. You were working well as an ensemble, and here you had a guy with a great voice.
Yeah, I mean, but also, don't forget that we thought, well, hang on, wait a minute, maybe this is it. You definitely always think that every time. You think, well, maybe this is, what a shame. Maybe this is the time. We've come to the end, sort of thing. Very much in our minds, and then we just thought, like I always do in life, you just thought, well, let's write some songs and see what happens. And the first week, it kind of took off a little bit, which is great.
But what's the dynamic of Genesis in the studio? Is it a very democratic one? You've got a lot of good musicians playing together. The songs, certainly in those early days, had odd constructions. So was there just a lot of people throwing in a lot of ideas?
Well, the other thing is, with 5 in the band, we're never going to last. There were just too many ideas. You know what I mean? There wasn't room, one album a year. And in those days, an album was probably 35 minutes. There's not many songs. But so in a sense, when it comes down to 4 and then 3, there was kind of more room to breathe in a nice way. You didn't have to try so hard in a sense. So I think, and the first, there's a weird moment because Peter towards the end on The Lamb was doing so many lyrics. At the time, the rest of us were slightly working instrumentally. So in a way, when he left, that sort of strength was sort of in our minds.
of my city, bright and gold. Let me take you there, show you a living story. Let me show you others such as me, wide-eyed.
I am Neil McCormick, watching Needle Time with my guest, Mike Rutherford. So, in this second iteration of Genesis, you've got Steve Hackett playing guitar and a kind of fluid lead guitarist. But you were also, as you say, playing a lot of rhythm guitar and 12-string guitar and bass pedals. Was your playing with Steve very different to what it is now? Did it fulfill a certain musical role to fit in with his?
It was a great combination, actually, because Steve's a great player. I mean, a very fluid player and a very sort of sound player with unusual sounds, And it was a great in Genesis setting, actually, I thought. And my area of rhythm guitar, and chords and 12 strings, they work well together, actually. And in fact, I'm never quite sure why I left, actually. He had sort of solo ideas, but in a sense, there wasn't any kind of friction within the band. It was a nice setup, really.
Right. When he did leave, did that change your playing style and approach? Because what you didn't do is find another musician. You just...
Yeah, we did think about it, because I'm not a real sort of lead guitar player like Steve, and I never thought I ever would be, really, and I'm still really not that animal. But we thought about it, yeah. But then by that stage, the three of us had been kind of such a good unit. Some of those songs like Cinema Show, when it was a sort of three-piece thing, and we just sort of felt it'd be quite hard to bring someone else in. We're so far down the road by that time, learnt so many things together, had so many sort of similar experiences shared and sort of feelings. We thought it would be quite a test, so we just sort of thought we'd try it without.
And you had to step up to the plate. Did that change your playing? Did your playing improve?
Yeah, well, it did rather slowly, actually, like my very first playing, a bit slow off the mark. The first album without Steve was Then There Were Three.
And Then There Were Three.
There's the title. People say to me, why was it called that? To this day. Yeah, I didn't do much lead playing, really, but it was a way to get through an album and feel confident that it would work without Steve, in a sense. And that little funny song, Follow You, Follow Me, came along and just sort of gave us a jump up in a way, in quite a nice way, as a hit single, and it was a nice little sort of, it's a light song, but it was never too sugary, so it seemed to work that one.
Stay with me, my love. I hope you'll always be right here by my side. If ever I need you, oh my love. In your arms, I feel so safe and so secure. Every day is such a perfect day to spend along with you. I will follow you, follow me all the days and nights that we know will be. I will stay with you, will you stay with me? Just one single tear in each passing year.
Did you enjoy being the new lead guitarist in Genesis?
Yeah, I never really saw it actually like that way. I always sort of come from a songwriting thing. Mm-hmm. As long as you can cover enough. I mean, if I was doing it now, probably I would have maybe on the album brought in a sort of friend session player to cover a bit of the ground. At the time, we didn't think about that. Obviously, on stage, we needed to bring another guitarist because I couldn't do both on stage. Right. But at the time, it sort of worked enough.
Oh, you had that double neck guitar.
Yeah, I still couldn't. I can't do three things.
The double neck guitar. I think those things must weigh a ton.
bloody heavy. I mean, they really are heavy, actually. I've got them in the studio now, and there was a couple of them that sort of custom made over the years. They're just brutes, you know. And also, they don't sit like the guitar normally sits. You hold the guitar, take your hands away, it's balanced. Double neck, it's right over there.
So you've got to hold
You
the
gotta hold
whole
it, yeah.
the whole time. As the three-piece Genesis progressed, the character changed almost completely. You became a pop rock group. I mean, they were churning out the hit singles. Why was that? What was changing?
Well, nothing really changed our end. I mean, to be honest, I think what happened. I mean, we grew up with the Beatles and the Kinks. You know, hit singles were great. We just couldn't really write them. It wasn't really our sort of area that clicked in correctly. And then I think also what happened is the perception's a little bit like that. I mean, we got hit singles in America. It kind of went mad. But with the introduction of MTV and television music, you know, a hit single was suddenly just everywhere, in every restaurant, bar, gym, you know. And so it kind of overshadowed other songs on the album. And so I always say the albums that had the hit singles had long 15-minute tracks on it. But somehow, apart from the live shows, they weren't played on the radio, so you couldn't really get them out to the public. And things came into line, I suppose. Phil's popularity took off again, you know. And sort of, things just kind of happened, really. But it was never... we've always tried to write songs, but it didn't work very well.
Did you have... I mean, is there specific roles? You've got three very strong musicians, Tony Banks, Phil Collins and yourself, all songwriters. Did you write together? Was it the kind of jamming? Did somebody come in with a chord sequence? Was somebody good with lyrics? Was somebody good with hooks? Was there specific roles?
No, in a way, it was all a bit messed up. You know, different songs had different people. When Peter first left, we started writing a bit individually, because the problem we'd had is that everyone thought, as you do, the singer wrote all the songs, you know. And of course, some of the songs that were very popular on stage were written not by Peter at all, well, written more by Tony or Tony and me and stuff. And so, for a while, we thought, oh God, we better put our names on it. But then we realised about the album called Duke, I think. Actually, the best stuff you do together is when you go in the room and write. And from then onwards, we just used to go in the room with no ideas. I mean, on the day one, nothing. Didn't carry any ideas in, just go and improvise, jam. And some songs Phil did the words, some I did the words, some Tony did the words. There was no real pattern at all. And like, you know, on a song like Mama, that was my drum machine part, you know, that sort of started the song. There was no territory, which is nice.
Now I can keep you, Mama, but I know you're always there. You listen, you teach me, Mama, and I know inside you care. So get down here beside me. No, I won't hurt you, Mama, but it's getting so hard.
Were you getting better at honing things down then? Because it does become more economical in its approach.
Yeah, I think there's an album called Abercam where we definitely made a thought, you know what, we're starting to become a caricature of ourselves. And so we just tried to sort of make the sound a little less stodgy and grandiose, you know. But it still snuck back in again after that, you know. You can't keep it away.
Well, stodgy and grandiose.
Can't
That
keep Tony
was
Banks and his chords down.
part of the flavour of the 70s. Really, wasn't it? You know, Genesis, and it was Genesis and Pink Floyd, and the idea that these two bands were these reaching for the sky, really.
I think with that progressive tag, which you say is a funny old, not a very charming old tag, you're trying to do something a bit different. And what it means is that sometimes, if it doesn't work, it sounds really not very good. But when it does work, it's original. And that's what you're kind of striving for, really, I think.
How did things change in the 80s? I'm just wondering, you must have had a much more kind of visible fame, I think, because first of all there's video and there's a succession of hit singles.
Yeah, you get this wave sometimes in your life when you can't do any wrong. You know, you see bands like Oasis for a while, they had this sort of role. You just can't go wrong, you know what I mean?
Right.
And it's just the right time. And the 80s for us and Phil's success and our solo careers and me and the Mechanics, it just all sort of like, you can't believe what happened really. It was sort of out of the box, so to speak.
McCormick. You're watching Needle Time with my guest, Mike Rutherford. So the 80s, as you had your own solo success, your band anyway, Mike and the Mechanics. So why did you want to do your own thing first off?
I do think Genesis were the only band who ever managed to make this solo thing and the band thing run alongside for about 15 years, happily, successfully. You know, the key is most guys start a solo career if they're in a band because they're frustrated, which is fair enough, really. In our case, we were having a great time. We were loving the band, but then you suddenly start thinking, we've been going for quite a while now. Maybe you want to just do a little bit of widen your musical horizon. You know, in the folk world and the jazz world and the blues world, they move around quite a bit. You know, other guys come in and play other parts. So we just thought we'll just try something a bit for variety, really, and a break. You know, I was seeing Phil and Tony every day, every year, so I need a slight gap, you know, and vice versa. So we started these sort of solo careers, and Phil's, first of all, Pete's was amazing. Phil's kind of took off with a big bang, and so I thought I'll try. I did a couple of solo albums, one with me singing. Hence, I formed the Mechanics. If you're not a singer, you need a great singer. You know, I'm a songwriter, and so the Mechanics album happened in sort of 84, 85, and I was just amazed. It kind of took off too. One of the odds of that, really.
Well, was it different for you? Were you writing more? Do you think your writing was different for?
Yeah, I mean the key really is it's the same process, but different guys in the room. You write a different way, and that's the exciting point. You know, I had a list of my publisher of possible new songwriters, and the top 2 out of 10 was B. Robertson and Chris Neal.
Okay,
I didn't get past those two. That's the Mechanics' first little writing team, the first 2 albums, and it just sort of worked. You know, found a sort of sound actually in a funny way.
Take the children and yourself and hide out in the cellar. By now the fighting will be close at hand. Don't believe the church and state and everything they tell you. Believe in me, I'm with the high command.
So B.A. Robson had a minor kind of almost novelty pop career, but was a good lyricist. Was that his job with your...
Oh, both. But lyricist is very strong, actually, I must say. And and it's a nice the way it happened. The very first album had a song called Silent Running, which was a sort of 7-minute song. And America was the first place to release it, Atlantic. And they're playing a sort of heavy track called Hanging by a Thread. It's a bit average, really. And they got keen on doing Silent Running, which is our choice. And it went out, and it was 7 minutes long, and it just sort of took off on the radio. And no one knew who I was, you know what I mean? I didn't put my name on it. There was no stickering, you know, from Genesis. I made sure of that. And one of those nice moments where sort of a new sound connects with the country.
You had Paul Carrick singing. Why did you choose Paul?
Well, we wrote the album and recorded it in Montserrat without the singers.
Right.
Came back with 10 tracks and thought, who's going to sing it, you know? No panic suddenly, you know? And so Paul came down early on. I knew Paul a bit and sang Silent Running. And Paul Young from Sad Cafe came down and sang Miracle. And two other guys sang on the album too. But just sort of, it came together, the two Pauls seemed to sort of have a nice feel for the band. But once again, you know, luck and timing.
Is that a band, like in the way Genesis is a band, or is it just
at the start? It wasn't at all. The first album, they didn't meet all the guys, all the players, until the photograph shoot for the artwork. Then it became really myself and the two Pauls, because other guys changed a bit. And I had the same drummer for a long time, but it moved around a bit in a nice way. You know what I mean? Who's available this year, sort of thing. So myself and Paul Carrick and Paul Young became really the sort of the nucleus of the band. Yeah.
Okay. And do you get something different out of?
Yeah, I think, you know, what's quite nice is that it's just a different way of writing, different way of playing things. Maybe some of the bits I used would have been with Phil and Tony, gone somewhere else, you know. Probably a slightly lighter sound, a little less dark overall. But it's sort of, once again, you know, variety and fun to do. So after the Mechanics album and a couple of tours maybe, I'll then go with Phil and Tony again and kind of look forward to seeing them again, you know, having had a break, really.
Right. As a group who've been together, certainly Phil and Tony and yourself, you were together a long, long time, and we know that groups can get fraught, and hence so many groups break up. What's the interaction? What's the relationship?
Overall, to be honest, I mean, pretty good. I mean, we've remained really good friends. The bulk of our career was probably really with myself and Phil and Tony, because that's sort of the whole year, and we toured so much in the sort of 80s and 90s, you know. But done a recent documentary, which was for the BBC, and we spent a couple of days ago, the five of us, Phil and Peter and Tony and Steve Hackett, and it was fun. I mean, there's no animosity, there never really was any animosity. And I think at this age, you start remembering some of those nice moments even more. You almost treasure them slightly more, because in a sense, they were great times, really.
Why do you think there was no animosity when so many bands?
Well, first of all, I started with Peter and Tony, you know, at school. So it's hard when you've been at school with somebody to sort of ever let them sort of become a bit too big for their boots, you know, and vice versa. And I think I had the same manager since the beginning, pretty much, which does matter. There wasn't a sort of, you know, there wasn't a Phil Collins manager and a Mechanics manager and a Genesis manager, so no one sort of pulled in different ways, which did help, actually.
But that's, you know, there isn't at the start, but that's what happens to bands, but evidently it didn't, although you did have these changing lineups.
I mean, but that it sounds not important, but it does help a bit, you know. There's no one saying different ways to live, to spend that year, sort of thing. And we just had a lot of fun. I mean, we had a lot of laughs, actually, Genesis. And so that's sort of, I think, stopped ever sort of any grandiose moments of, I'm leaving you, you're an idiot, you know. It was quite good.
So we open up a quarrel between the present and the past. We only sacrifice the future. It's the bitterness that lasts. So don't yield to the fortunes you sometimes see as fate. It may have a new perspective on a different day. And if you don't give up and don't give in, passed away. I didn't get to tell him all the things I had to say. I think I caught his spirit later that same year. I'm sure I heard his echo in my baby's newborn tears. I just wish I could have told him in the living years. So say it, say it, say it loud. Say it clear. Oh, say it clear. You can listen as well as you hear. Hold on, my heart. Just hold on to that feeling. We both know we've been here before. We both know what can happen. Hold on, my heart. 'Cause I'm looking over your shoulder. Ooh, please don't rush in this time. Don't show her how you feel. Hold on, my heart. Throw me a lifeline. I'll keep a place for you somewhere deep inside. So hold on, my heart. Please tell her to be patient, 'cause there has never been a time that I wanted something more. If I can recall this feeling,
I'm Neil McCormick. You're watching Needle Time with my guest, Mike Rutherford. So, is Genesis over now? Is that...
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's no plans. I mean, we had a good fun last year, the five of us together, chatting about the story of and our lives, really. There's no plans. I mean, we're still good friends, so you never know. But there's nothing planned, really, I think.
Is that, not many groups retire. Not many musicians at all seem to retire. I'm not saying that you have retired. Indeed, you're here right now. So, what do you do? What keeps you active in music?
For me, really, I kind of restarted. The Mechanics kind of ground to halt about 10 years ago when Paul Young died, and we sort of stopped it then. And then I sort of started, and Paul Cracker and I both felt a bit like our era had been, in a nice way, end of an era. So I restarted about 3 years ago. We had some songs, and I thought, let's have a Mechanics song. So I sort of... And then the other thing is that, firstly, live has sort of picked up again. Live shows are more important in a way now. And the Mechanics songs, we hardly ever played live at all before, They're never much of our makeup. And so we started playing some of these songs live, and I found we always had two singers, an R&B voice and a rock voice, and it was Carrick with the R&B voice, and so Andy Rochford came along with the R&B voice and the feel, and Tim Howard with the rock voice wrote some songs, went on the road, and I was amazed how well the songs went down on stage. Like I don't know, Silent Running, Living Ears, all these sort of songs, and so I've been touring that a bit the last 2 or 3 years.
Do you still write?
Yeah, I've been writing the last couple of months, actually. But this time around, I'm going to actually play the songs live, first of all.
All right.
And kind of put them into shape,
Yeah, well, it's the way a lot of people do before they start.
I know. And then after. The good thing about live is if a song isn't good enough, it just won't work live. And if you can't make it work live, then it's not a good enough song. So it's quite a good test.
Do you think of yourself primarily as a songwriter?
Yeah. I'm a songwriter. That's my main thing. I mean, obviously... Live is more happening now, so you kind of go with the flow a bit in that way. But I'm always really, songwriting is really what gets me going.
And you still, that's still percolating all the time with you. What do you have melodies drifting around your head, or do you sit at an instrument? And
Every time it gets harder, because the older you get, the more you kid yourself less. You know what I mean? When you're young, you go, "Oh, I've got 30 songs, they're great." 20 years on, you go, "I've got 5 songs that aren't too bad." You get tough on yourself. If a song isn't right, you don't pretend that it's going to be okay. You're more realistic about what's good and what's bad.
And what about lyrically? I mean, you've worked with great lyricists from Peter Gabriel to Peter Robinson. But do you write lyrics?
Yeah, I mean, I to be honest, when I got going with BA for a while, he was so strong. I wrote lyrics with Chris Neal together, and not with BA. So I've had to sort of get my lyric hat on a bit more recently. But I do enjoy it, actually. Yeah.
Do you find the subject matter is changing?
The best thing is when you write a song and the key words or the key line comes out with the melody. That's the best way to do it. And then you've got to make them sound good, the whole song. But if you start with a phrase that really catches it, and it's always about you try and find a little take on things sometimes. I quite enjoy using everyday words.
Okay. Do you miss playing at the scale that Genesis could play out? The stadium concerts or not? Were they?
No, I mean everyone always sort of goes, "Oh, stadiums." Listen, it's 70,000 people, 100,000 people who want you to be there. The energy is fantastic. It's a great feeling on that stage, and we had great productions and lights and films. It all kind of worked with our music very well. The Mechanics is the opposite. There's no films, there's barely any lights. It's just about the guys on stage and the gear working and the energy. And I quite enjoy the variety in a sense, yeah.
Yeah, you say, Genesis shows were known to be very spectacular.
Well, they were also, when you're playing stadiums, you've got to make something a little bit larger than life, There are days when the Mechanics travel, and I do miss the old spoiling private plane sometimes, when you're being costed around the world. The Mechanics don't get costed very much. But it's the guys are great fun. I really enjoy all the players, and that makes it worth doing, really.
Yeah, so you enjoyed, it sounds like, you enjoyed your decades of rock and roll fame. You didn't, Genesis don't seem to have fallen off the wayside and developed terrible drug habits and got dragged through the mud and the mire, which so many bands did. Why?
I always say, well, firstly, we live in England. It does help. You come back home in England, go to the pub, you know, when you're in your heyday, and they ignore you. You know what I mean? In America, they believe the dream. You know, oh, Mike. In England, it's like looks the other way. You know, and I kind of like that. You know, I live in the country. It always helps, I think, actually, on a farm down there, and we're married to the same lady Angie for 38 years. That helps too. You know what I mean? Keeps your feet on the ground. And I also think that the kind of schedule we had. Bless our manager. There's 120 shows a year. You know, it's hard to misbehave and get in trouble and keep going year after year. You know, it's fine for a little bit when you're young, but when you get older and have kids, you can't sort of keep going like that. So, and in a way that people forget, you know, playing those shows and the audiences and that reaction, it's very exciting. That it's a real adrenaline buzz.
He's gone, he's forgotten what he did, and now lies down. I'm Broadway. Susan tried her work on money, honey, beyond me. That man's velvet glove sound the horn, and the Stardust King spits out his scorn. Wonder women, you control your blind. Don't look at me, I'm not your kind. Something inside me has just begun. Lord knows what I have done, and the love lies down. I'm Broadway.
Do you keep up with much new music?
I think at the moment, UK stuff is a great scene, actually, I think. I mean, I always listen to the radio in the cars where I sort of pick up stuff, and my kids show me stuff. But I mean, I like them, and it's just interesting stuff at the moment. I mean, you know that lovely Adele thing, which is a singer-songwriter, you know, and then Ed Sheeran and Sam Smith. I think it's great. I mean, it's exciting stuff. And that guy, Hosier. There's good stuff out there. There's good songs. I mean, really good songs.
So you've mentioned all the people you've mentioned are very much kind of soul-singing songwriters, as opposed to, you know, florid, expansive, epic rockers. Was that, and you've talked about the songs. Was there always really just a pop songwriter lurking underneath all that?
Probably because, you know, people forget when we started off, the Stones was pop, the Beatles were pop, the Who were pop. You know what I mean? It's a category I find not a bad word. I mean, it's got a horrible tag now, pop music, but actually in my day, that's how we started, really. And a good song is a good song, you know. I think, and on the way we had Genesis and the long pieces of music, you know, Summer's Ready and the half-hour suites and stuff, and had a sort of musical journey that was interesting. But a good bit's still a good bit.
You say you got together for a televised reunion, a discussion, and you know, a walk down memory lane, and you've written a book, and you've thought. So every band that ever walked the earth seems to have reunited, even if there's only one member left to reunite with himself. But it always seemed that Genesis would be very difficult to reunite, because what is Genesis? There's like 3 versions of the
As
band.
Phil often said, actually, the idea that, get back together again, they haven't really worked it out, have they? You know what I mean? There'll be Peter singing, you know, Man of Confusion. They haven't really worked out how it actually going to work. You know what I mean? It's the old Genesis with Phil on drums, which he'd probably like to do, but he can't drum very much at the moment. Or something more modern, but whoever knows. I mean, I've always said never say never. It's the easy line, actually.
It is easy line, but is it?
But then, like I said it for years, then Phil came back in the tour we did in 07, that sort of world tour we did. But I think what's nice is, I mean, this last couple of years, it must be an age thing. Maybe doing the book I did about me and my dad and my life, you know, you look back and you have great memories. I mean, warm memories of the other guys of the band, and the times too, of the times we had together.
So all positive stuff, except for, you know, I have to mention I did have a look at all the old videos and stuff when I was doing a bit of research, and there was that period when the box jacket shoulders got
bloody shoulder pads. Bloody shoulder. I know. It's a bit like A friend of mine got married when it was like Carnaby Street days, with flared trousers and platform shoes and a big white suit, and that just doesn't last, you know what I mean? The shoulder pads, because, prior to that, I'd do a tour and wear just two-seater, the same t-shirt every night. There was no sort of, you didn't really know how you looked in a way. And unfortunately, that sort of, suddenly had to worry about what you're going to wear, which is the pain for us, really.
Right. Well, whatever you were wearing, the music was great. So
Thanks
for coming on Needle Time and talking about it.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Rutherford.